Hello everyone. So this is the third video in my series about this HopChop R hot patch cutting jig that I've designed and providing to the community. This last part is about how to apply some measurements to determine what patch to cut or what depth to cut. The first part was about how to assemble one of these from the parts that you get. The second one was about how to just cut a patch in general, how to use the scale, how to lubricate the blade. And so this final video will take a look at this sort of a spare barrel that I have. This came from Tokyo Marui AUG. So, this doesn't have anything done to it whatsoever. It's actually quite dirty, but that's a different story. So anyway, with the hop-up window, we know that there's a length, there's a depth that we want to find out, right? The depth, and ultimately we need to translate that over to the HopChop itself. So the first thing I do is I take a caliper. This one's millimeters, and I measure the outside diameter, and it's telling me it is 8.55 millimeters. So I would write that down, which I already have previously, and then the next thing I would do is I would measure the depth at this window. So I would bring the calipers in, square it as best I can, and it's telling me it is 6.7 millimeters. So that's the next thing I would write down. And then finally, I would actually want to measure the thickness of, well, really just this lip, because that's where I can get my calipers into. And I'm getting, I am getting 1.25. I can verify it along a different spot. You do want to make sure you try to square that as best as you can. 1.25 looks about right. So once I have those three, I make one more adjustment. I make one more measurement for later on. The unique thing about this particular barrel is that I can see the edges of the window are actually angled. So I would measure the width of this window, and I'm getting 5.1 millimeters. Okay, if I measure it right at the center, and I end up measuring some of the angled dimension, and I actually get 5.5 millimeters. So between the base length here and what's on this top length, there's close to a 0.3 or 0.4 millimeter difference. But anyway, so now I would then take the OD that I measured, and I would subtract the thickness that I measured here plus the thickness of the wall, and so that ends up being 8.55 millimeters minus 6.7 and minus 1.25, and I get 0.6 millimeters. Now what that means is that if everything is what it's supposed to be, from the inner diameter of this hop-up window to where this flat is, there's 0.6 millimeters. So I would then take that number and I would dial it in onto my jig. In this case, 0, 0.2, 0.4, 0.6. And that's where I want to make a cut on the patch. so I can do that really quick. Hopefully all this works out the way that I planned. And then here goes napkins here. Alright. So again, double check my settings. I'm at 0.6. So one thing that you want to do is, you know, as easy as this is, you do want to make sure you feed it. You want to feed the tubing at a rate that's, you know, doesn't cause it to bunch up. As much as, you know, the jig is supposed to hold everything, the rubber still has give. So if you try to feed it in too fast, there is a potential for it to wedge a little bit. So, you know, try a couple different speeds, and, you know, I just slow and steady, I guess in most cases should be fine. So then now I've got a patch that should be the right depth, you know, to fit onto my barrel, but I still need to trim the length, and I measured 5.1 millimeter. So I'm going to go ahead and set my calipers to 5.1. And then let's see. It's pretty obvious that this edge up here is not square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this thing now. This thing is something that I have not had a chance to tell everybody about too much, but it is another jig that allows me to cut a little bit more, cut a patch square. Let's see if I can make this work. It's just started to test it, so I still require a little bit of experimentation. But anyway, so I'm going to set my patch up right on here to the mark that I've created. And then I can use either my any trusty blade, alright. So then, there it is. Put this back aside, and it should fit nicely in my calipers. Yeah, it still is a little bit tight. So it might be that one edge of it is still not 100% square. That's a possibility. What I could have done is I could have cut a square. I could have cut it square on one edge first and then trim the other side. But plus, you know, the blade has some amount of thickness that I'm not accounting for. So I could just go in and try and trim this. Let's see if it works. I just took a really thin sliver off of that. Cool. It's probably a little bit too much now. Who knows? So that actually fits pretty well. So let me go ahead and give that a try. Okay, it sits pretty well. Of course, like I said, the edges of this window has an angle to it, so it's not flush in the front and the back lip, but it sits properly onto the base of that window. And you know, it's hard to show how well it looks on the inside, but it looks pretty flush, and I have to dive into it a little bit more to figure out how good that really is. But at the same time, you know, it's you can decide whether or not you want to apply exactly the measurement that you found, or you know, you want to be safe and cut a little bit shallower, and that way you would guarantee that it might sit a little bit lower. So some of that preference is certainly you know, up for debate at this point. But yeah, this one is a little bit loose, right? But I didn't spend a lot of time trimming this. But the point is that that's how I would measure a hop-up window, trim a patch, and put it in, and try to fit it. So hopefully that gives you enough information to, you know, take the jig and experiment with it. Try out different ways of applying it, and love to hear any feedback, all the good, bad results, whatever it is. All right, thanks.